Today is May 28th, 2014, and we are interviewing Hubert G. Staff at the Adams County Courthouse, Quincy, Illinois. Mr. Staff is 74 years old, having been born on July 15th, 1939. My name is Anita Rodriguez, and I'll be the interviewer here today. Mr. Staff, could you state for the recording what branch of service you served in?
I was in the U.S. Air Force for about 4 years, and then the Illinois Air National Guard for about 4 years.
And did you enlist in the U.S. Air Force?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And where did you start out your training for the U.S. Air Force?
Well, I went to officers training school at Lackland Air Force Base. It was a little sub base called Medina, and officers training school was a 3-month intensive training program, and upon successful graduation, then you were commissioned second lieutenant. And
where is Lackland Air Force Base located?
It's near San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. And for officers training, did you already have a college degree prior to that?
Yes, I had just graduated a few months before from the University of Illinois.
And what was your undergraduate major?
I had a degree in agriculture, economics.
Why did you decide to enlist in the U.S. Air Force?
I thought it was the lesser of several evils.
Okay.
Vietnam War was going on, and I felt that I would be a better fit for the Air Force than any of the other branches of service.
And after your officers training, the 3 months of officers training, where did you go from there?
I went for 10 months of training to Keesler Air Force Base at Biloxi, Mississippi, and this was a 10-month program for communication electronics to train communication officers.
Okay, and communication electronics officer, can you kind of explain what your responsibilities were? What does that mean exactly?
Once I was on the job?
Yes, once you're on the job.
Somewhat of a broad field. For example, initially on my first base assignment after school at Ellsworth Air Force Base, I was called what was called the base communications officer, which meant that I was in charge of the men and women that maintained the communication systems, the inter-base communication systems, and that involved supervising personnel, taking care of the logistics and supplies and things of this nature.
Okay, so let's go back just a minute to Biloxi. Is it Keesler?
Yes.
Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. So you were there for 10 months?
Yes, that's correct.
And what was your experience like while you were there?
Well, it was kind of like a vacation. The school was 6 hours a day, but you had the rest of the day off, and Biloxi at that time was kind of a vacation spot for a lot of people. It was my first experience in the South, and I enjoyed that assignment very much. Met some people there that I maintained friendships with for many years.
Good. Okay. And then you were assigned first to Ellsworth Air Force Base, and that is outside of Rapid City, South Dakota. Is that right?
That's correct.
And how long were you assigned to Ellsworth Air Force Base?
Well, it had been about 3 years, I guess, just a little less than 3 years. And I might add that when I transferred from Keesler Air Force Base on the coast, on the Gulf Coast, to Ellsworth Air Force Base, I went from 70 degrees to minus 25 degrees. It was in January.
Okay, so that took some getting used to, I assume.
That's right.
Okay. Was there anything unusual about your experience at Ellsworth Air Force Base?
Well, I don't know, in the overall scheme of things, I was, the last 2 years, I was involved with the Minuteman missile program that carried the atomic warheads. And since that was a relatively new program, there were a lot of interesting experiences. And being 23 years old and being raised in rural Adams County, Illinois, a lot of things were new experiences.
Sure. Okay. And then where did you go from Ellsworth Air Force Base?
Well, that was my last active duty assignment, and I left Ellsworth to go to law school.
Okay, so so your 4 years total in the U.S. Air Force ended at Ellsworth Air Force Base.
That's right.
Okay, so you were never assigned to the Vietnam War was going on, correct?
That's right.
But you weren't actively, you didn't fight in the war.
I didn't go to Vietnam. No.
Okay. I guess one thing I would ask from the associates that you met at your training in Biloxi, as well as your years at Ellsworth Air Force Base, did some of your co-workers, in fact, go to Vietnam that you're aware of?
None that I'm aware of. My co-workers, there may have been some that at some point were transferred to Vietnam. In fact, after I had applied for release from the Air Force, I found out from a friend in SAC headquarters that I had been assigned to go to Vietnam, but since I was getting out, I didn't go. So I'm sure some of them did.
Okay.
I don't remember any by names that did.
And then during the time you were in the U.S. Air Force, I assume, did you get along with the other officers and fellow soldiers? Was there a camaraderie?
Well, I got along well, yes. I had, my last 2 years, I was commander of a squadron, about 35, 40 men. From time to time, the numbers would change. But we were in charge of maintaining the electronic security systems on the underground missiles, the Minuteman missiles. And since that, while I was the commander of that squadron, I was between the ages of 23 and 25, and I did know enough to let them take care of what they did best without trying to pretend that I knew their jobs. And so I got along well with all the people that worked for me.
And all of your electronic training, did that all come from the Air Force?
Yes.
Okay. All right. After you got out of the Air Force, then you indicated that you served in the U.S. Air National Guard?
Yes, while I was in law school at the University of Illinois, I joined the Illinois Air National Guard, and I served as communication officer for the 183rd for a little less than 4 years until I moved back to Quincy. And for 1 year after I'd moved to Quincy, I moved to Quincy in 1968, and then 1 year later, I terminated my association with the Air Guard.
Okay, let me back you up just a little bit. After you got out of the U.S. Air Force, then you said you went to law school at the University of Illinois. Is that correct, in Champaign, Illinois?
Yes.
Okay, and is that a plan that you'd had all along, or is that something you decided to do after you got out of the Air Force?
Actually, it's something I decided to do probably halfway through the Air Force career. And so I started making plans about a year before I left the Air Force.
And was there anything in your experience with the Air Force that somehow triggered that interest in the law?
I don't think so. I would have to say, frankly, though, that one or two people that I met associated with in the Air Force who were lawyers, it did influence me to some degree.
Okay. And those individuals, did they practice law while in the Air Force? Were they part of the advocate corps?
No, they weren't. They had line jobs like I did, commands.
And with regard to your education, was there any kind of educational benefits after you left the Air Force that helped pay for your law school?
Well, yes, I had the GI Bill, which, as I recall, was about $150 a month. And then, of course, I had the Air National Guard job, which was another $100 a month.
And while you were in law school and you were part of the Air National Guard, can you explain how much time that took and what your obligations were while you were in law school with the Air National Guard?
It was one full weekend a month. And my only obligations were when I was in Springfield for that 2 days. In other words, there was nothing that I had to do in between times.
So you traveled from Champaign to Springfield, which is what, an hour and 15 minutes or so, 1 weekend a month.
That's right.
And was that weekend then you did training exercises, or?
We did training, and there was a certain amount of personnel work involved with it, and it's basically a support group to the pilots.
Okay, and if you could explain the Illinois Air National Guard, what exactly do they do?
Well, they have tactical units. This particular unit had fighter aircraft, and they train, and they were never called to active duty while during the 4 years that I served there, but from time to time these Illinois Air National Guard units are called to active duty.
Okay, and so if that would have happened while you were in law school, if they were called into active duty, then you would have left law school, gone into active duty for whatever period of time.
Right, for however long a period of time they required.
Okay, but that did not happen while you were in the 3 years of law school. I assume it took 3 years.
Right.
Of law school.
Right.
Okay, and after you got out of law school, then you were still in the Air National Guard. You said for a period of time.
A little less than 4 years.
Okay.
Well, actually, not after I got out of law school. I'm sorry. For only 1 year after I got out of law school was I in the Air National Guard.
And did you after you graduated from law school, then did you immediately move to Quincy, Illinois?
Yes, we did.
And what did you do after law school? Other than moving to Quincy, what did you do as far as your practice is concerned?
Well, I associated with Charles Schultz and his father, Richard Schultz Sr.
And that's a private law practice?
That's a private law practice.
Okay.
And after about 9 months, Charles and I became partners, and we were partners in private practice for 25 years. And then I've I had my own law office since 1993. And during that period of time, in the last 14 or 15 years, my son Andrew's staff has been associated with me, been a partner. It's a general practice, civil practice.
And as far as your military experience is concerned, did you feel that the experience you had in the military benefited you when you later went into your law practice?
Yes, it benefited me in several ways because as I look back on it, I had some pretty great responsibilities for a 23, 24, 25-year-old. And so I think the confidence that it gave me, the experience of dealing with stress, these were some of the attributes.
Would you encourage young men and women today to enlist?
No.
And can you explain why not?
Well, I've become somewhat anti-military. Not that I don't respect a great deal the soldiers and the men and women that serve in the military. And I respect the importance of having a strong military for our country. What I have a problem with is the politicians leading us into what I consider to be unnecessary and unwinnable military conflicts. I support a draft as opposed to enlistments, although we'll always have enlistments, but I support a draft because I believe that if the general public's children, young people, were subject to the draft, they would be less likely to support these military conflicts.
You've said a little bit about this, but has your view of the government, before your military service, did it change while you were in the military as a result of your experience, or has it mostly changed as a result of world events since your military service?
Well, it changed to some degree because of my military experience. And let me just expand on that a bit. And I have to tell a story. One of my 18-year-old airmen that worked for me blew an atomic warhead off the top of a missile. And they wanted to court-martial him. And what had happened is, instead of using an insulated fuse puller, he had used a screwdriver, and the circuit shorted out and blew this atomic warhead off up against the silo lid, fell down beside the missile. I maintained that it was a system design problem as much as it was negligence on the part of the airman. That did not go over well because I felt they needed a scapegoat. And I went to bat for this kid. And I eventually enlisted the support of my congressman, who intervened. And the kid, whose name I don't remember, was not dishonorably discharged. What I saw was career military people, senior officers. I was a junior officer. I was a first lieutenant at the time. I saw the colonels and the generals wanting to sweep this under the rug, use the kid as an excuse and discharge him. And what I saw was, or I felt I saw, that we need junior officers who are not career officers. Because had I been a career officer, I would have about had to go along with the program if I expected to make it in the Air Force. At that time, I knew I was not a career officer, so I didn't have much to lose. And in fact, I was relieved of my command and made a special assistant to the wing commander, sat at a desk outside his office for the remaining 2 months of my career. So my point of my story is that I believe that we always need volunteer or drafted, junior officers that know that they're not going to make it a career, who will react differently in situations from career officers.
So your reassignment for those 2 months was because you went to bat for the 18-year-old?
Right, I was not a game player in this. I mean, I had been up to that time. So I was a threat to them, I guess, and so I went to the gym every day for 2 hours. It's a nice way to end my career.
Right. And why would they have? They were looking to make the 18-year-old scapegoat rather than to consider that it was a design flaw. Is
Yes,
that right?
That's correct.
Because that would have fallen back on some of the senior officers had it been a design flaw?
It could be, and it could be that there could have been a lot of bad publicity for the entire system and the funding of the system. So there were a lot of political implications. Plus, senior officers worrying about their own careers,
Now, this occurred while you were at Ellsworth?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't understand exactly what the 18-year-old did. Were there actually warheads there, atomic warheads at Ellsworth?
Yes, so we had 150 Minuteman missile. Each one had an atomic warhead on it. And the fellows that worked in my squadron maintained the electronic security systems. And he was doing some maintenance when he pulled this fuse and blew this atomic warhead. All these atomic warheads were programmed, as I learned afterwards, for Russia and China. This program has been in the news recently with the alleged cheating scandal of the underground missile commanders, the guys that have the buttons to push, and they've been cheating supposedly on their exams, and so it's back in the news.
Okay. So all the 150 missiles with atomic warheads that were at Ellsworth, those were stored there?
No, they were active.
They were active.
They were active on the ends of the missiles. They could be fired, and they were called ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. That was during the Cold War, and so this was the Cold War side of the military.
Okay. And what happened when this accident happened? Was there any damage?
No damage.
Okay. And nobody was injured?
Nobody was injured. There was no explosion. No.
Okay. Any other? That's a very interesting experience and observation. Are there any other experience like that you can share with us?
Well, it's unrelated, I guess, to the active duty. Well, it's related. I had what was called a top security clearance, and that was the highest security clearance that existed at that time anyway. This, by the way, was the Strategic Air Command, called SAC, which was one of the major commands. But because of this top security clearance, before I received this top security clearance, at about the time I was transferred to Ellsworth Air Force Base, the FBI came to Lorain, Illinois. You know where Lorain is?
I know where Lorraine is.
And did a background check, including in my hometown. And my dad started receiving calls and said, Hube, what kind of trouble is your boy in? The FBI was here today.
Oh, okay. I assume you've probably seen some of the war movies. Is that right? What is your opinion of those?
I've seen very few, frankly.
Okay.
Because they don't interest me. And now I'm interested in like the Civil War history and the World War II history, but I'm more interested in the political implications and the necessity of those wars than I am specific battles. Basically, I oppose anything that glorifies war.
Understood. Okay. And do you have an opinion about how war and history is taught in schools today?
Well, I don't really know how it's taught in schools today, I guess. There's a fine line between honoring our veterans, which this program does, I think, or attempts to do. There's a fine line between that and being militaristic. I guess that's all I need to say about that, as Forrest Gump would say.
Okay. All righty. Any other, you've told us that your military service did benefit you in several ways, made you responsible, gave you confidence, helped deal with stress. Any other positive things that you took away from your experience in the service?
I think discipline, self-discipline, and honoring superiors, chain of command. Understanding that there's so many different types of people and that you need to learn to deal with a lot of different kinds of personalities.
And I'm sure that has benefited you in your law practice.
I think it is.
Okay. Did you join a veterans organization after your military service?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And you still haven't been a part of a veterans organization to this day?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. Anything else that we haven't talked about that you would like to add, Mr. Staff?
I'll think of something to add.
Okay. Let me
Well,
see here.
once in a great while, I have my children, I have 4 children, will ask me something about the military or my participation in the military. And I think they find it sort of almost unbelievable that somebody that young of age, can have that responsibility, but that's true in the military. And so where else can a young person get that much experience that fast?
Oh, exactly, exactly. Now, when you were in active service, were you married at that time? Were you single?
I mentioned that I spent 10 months in Biloxi in school
Correct.
at Keesler Air Force Base. Halfway through that, I was married.
Okay.
And my first child was born at Ellsworth Air Force Base.
Okay.
And my second child was born at Ellsworth Air Force Base. Quite a financial savings at the time compared when my second two were born after we moved back to Quincy. And by the way, our second two both came at the same time. They're twins. And that's when my wife and I decided that it's time for me to get out of the Air National Guard, because if I would be deployed and she'd be left with 4 children, under the age of 5 or 6 or whatever it was, it'd be a little difficult.
Oh, absolutely. Now, when you were at Ellsworth, did they have housing on the Air Force Base?
I was furnished, yes, with a house, nice house. And so we're very, very fortunate there.
Very good. All right, Mr. Staff, on behalf of the people of the state of Illinois, as well as all U.S. citizens, we thank you for your service.
Thank you for being interested in it.